Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So there's a few things I want to talk about in here. I want to talk about some Comic-Con details, some stuff about Lenny James, and a few other things. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. Comic-Con is in just 3 days from now, and it's going to be really interesting with Comic-Con because there's a lot of stuff that they could really, honestly, really announce that would create a lot of excitement for The Walking Dead. I don't know if we're going to get any sort of official announcement in terms of like a show, because like when it comes to that, I feel like a lot of that stuff is just sort of announced randomly, though I guess maybe they do save announcements for Comic-Con. Like usually they do, obviously with The Ones Who Live they did, right? They saved the announcement for Comic-Con. They had Andrew and Denai, show up on stage and announce the show, and obviously Gimple was there as well. So yeah, really cool, but I feel like, for the most part, some of the announcements happen sort of randomly as well. So it really depends, but I will say the one thing that I've noticed a lot with this year, specifically with New York Comic-Con, is that there's more of a focus on it. Usually in the past, San Diego Comic-Con is like the big sort of, event. And yes, this year it was, they focused on it like it was the bigger event. Scott Gimple wasn't there, so obviously I think in terms of announcements, like they weren't going to announce anything if Gimple wasn't there. But I also think if there was an announcement to make at all, they probably would have made it on their own at some point right after that. So I think that they just weren't really ready then. This time though could be different because obviously now Gimple is there. And so in terms of announcements of any kind, obviously The Ones Who Live Season 2 is very possible, unless it's going to be a new series. Like I do see that comment out there quite a bit that like The Ones Who Live Season 2, doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's better to just do like a new series or like a new story. To me, no matter what, a season 2 would be a new story anyways, because I think The Ones Who Live, when you just really look at the meaning of the show, The Ones Who Live, it's more about what Rick and Michonne were talking about beforehand. Like they are the ones who live, right? Like they can sort of overcome anything. And I think that's the meaning of the show. It really has nothing to do with like the CRM or any of that. And so I think for a season 2, like I've always said, I think the next part of the story for Rick and Michonne is still going to be involved with the CRM. Like it's not going to be them as villains, but like however they deal with like the next threat or whatever the story is going to be, the CRM will be involved in some way, or at least you'll hear about them. Maybe it starts off in episode 1 where we see Rick and Michonne helping the CRM, deliver supplies to people that really need the supplies and a lot of that, right? Like helping people build communities, this and that. Like I could see a lot of that happening in the very first episode. Then obviously eventually they deliver supplies to like the wrong people or something like that. And then something happens at that point, and I think there likely will be a story there because I know that that's something that, again, Andrew Lincoln's talked about that. He wants to make the story a little bit more like survival horror. So that's why I'm expecting a story like that. And then maybe the people that, they encounter, like maybe Morgan's involved, or like, I'm not entirely sure how that story would work out, but that's sort of how I see that playing out. It'll be more like that, I think. Then obviously you do have to have a bigger story sort of connected with everything overall. Like I think the expectation now for whenever Rick and Daryl reunite is some sort of endgame event, right? Like if you remember during the Ones Who Lives like press tours and all of that, when they were asked about, Rick and Daryl ever reuniting and all of that, the question that they were asked constantly was that, like, are we ever going to see Rick and Daryl reunite and all of that, right? And sort of, are we building to an endgame event? And Gimple almost seemed surprised by that in a weird way. Like he wasn't really surprised, but he was just sort of, he was saying that, they are laying the groundwork for that, basically. Like they're doing stuff here and there, and they're hoping to build to a moment like that. And so I think that that's something that they have to start doing here, obviously. And I think that maybe in Daryl Dixon season 2, it's not necessarily, I think maybe they are doing some stuff there, but Dead City is probably going to be the show where that really builds up the story overall for whatever happens there in terms of an end game, although that is set in the future, so there is some sort of issues there, I would say, overall. But yeah, there's a lot of questions, though, just in general about where things are going overall, right? And so that's what I'm really looking forward to in terms of Comic-Con, is like some of the details there, because I want to know more about where everything is going with the story here, and just, there's a lot more details there, because I think that we all need some of that right now. It feels a little weird to just have the 2 shows that we have right now, and the stories feel very self-contained. There's not really a lot of crossovers or anything like that. Like, yes, Carol just, showed up here on Daryl Dixon, but I think the one thing that they really want to do with these shows is establish a new story with like newer characters. And so that's what they're doing here, obviously, with Dead City and Daryl Dixon. And so let's actually get into the panel details here for The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, and Dead City. So for Dead City, I forgot the order here for the panels, so I don't know if Dead City is first first and then Daryl Dixon. I'm assuming it's probably going to be something like that, just because I think Daryl Dixon's going to be doing a preview of episode 4 or something that night. And so obviously for a lot of us, we'll be able to watch episode 4 this Sunday, but I think Friday they'll be showing episode 4. And so yeah, you'll have to watch out for spoilers for that. But for Dead City, and I'm getting this here from the official Walking Dead account, and it was announced today, New York Comic Con's panel for The Walking Dead Dead City is featuring Scott M. Gimple, Lauren Cohen, Gaius Charles, Zeltko Ivanek, and then Dasha Polanco, if I'm saying those names correctly. I'm not saying those names correctly, but yeah, really interesting because obviously the characters here are going to be main characters here and are probably going to be characters for season 3, I imagine. Though I guess we're not completely there, I guess, for the promotion of season 2 yet. I mean, they're promoting it right now. What's crazy is that Dead City season 2 is coming out in like a couple of months from now. Like, we're not going to have to wait as long as we did, for Daryl Dixon season 2 after The Ones Who Live ended, which was like 6 or 7 months from now, right? Like, I think Dead City should be out at some point February. I know that the rumor is like March or something like that, so like late February, early March or somewhere around there. And it's going to be 8 episodes as well, so we're going to be able to watch that for a long time, which is really honestly just so refreshing. I'm so excited for that. And so Daryl Dixon season 2 is going to end in early November. We'll be talking about that and sort of all of that throughout November. December and January may be quiet, but there's other shows that are out there. The Last of Us season 2 is supposed to be airing at some point early 2025. And then we have Dead City airing at some point in February or March. And so I'm just really excited about that. Honestly, I really cannot wait for this show here. I think that, this show is going to be really exciting once we learn a lot more details and once people actually check out the show. For some reason, The Walking Dead Dead City does better in ratings than The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon. I don't know why, but just, for season 1 anyways, it had way better ratings. And so we'll have to wait and see how season 2 does here. Maybe it's the fact that it's Negan, right? Like, Negan might be a big part of it because I know he's a really popular character. People really love Jeffrey Dean Morgan. And so we'll have to wait and see, right? We'll have to wait and see where this goes here. And so, yeah, the next panel here obviously is for Daryl Dixon, and we have Scott M. Gimple, obviously is going to be there, David Zabel, Greg Nicotero, Norman Reedus, Melissa McBride, and then I don't know what his name is, but it's Louis, and then I'm not going to try and pronounce the rest, but obviously he's the actor that plays Laurent. And so to me, that's really interesting because the actor who plays Laurent, he's been a big part of the promotion. He's been there for all the panels and whatnot for The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. So I think that tells me there that he's going to be probably a character in season 3, I'm guessing. I'm not sure where his story ends, but there's probably a way he'll be involved at some point in season 3, even if Daryl and Carol are like gone for a little bit and then they leave to get away from Pouvoir and like the nest and stuff. I'm sure at some point they'll end up, I guess, talking to Laurent, and Laurent will be a bbig part of the story because they have Laurent here, a part of the promotion a lot, and it sort of makes sense as to why they don't have Isabel at all. Like Madame Genet and Cadron and, you have Isabel, like, they haven't been a part of the promotion for this show at all, which I just find so off. But honestly, if all those characters die here this season, then it kind of makes sense overall, right? So, yeah, I'm really excited for this here. And obviously, Gimple being there, I think, is what is most exciting because I think Gimple is going to be able to actually really get into a lot of what's happening here overall with the story. And what's really interesting, I'm going to go back to Dead City here for a second because Scott Gimple's going to be there and it's just him with the rest of the cast. And I find that really interesting because for Daryl Dixon, you have the showrunner, David Zabel, right? And so to have him there, obviously he'll be talking about the show quite a bit. Gimple will be there as well. But I've noticed that when they do talk about the show overall, David Zabel really does, he talks a lot about the show and stuff. And so Gimple maybe won't speak as much, regarding the show and stuff. And so maybe because of that, we don't end up getting a lot of, talk about The Walking Dead just sort of overall. But Greg Nicotero is a part of this panel as well, but he's not a part of the Dead City panel. And I think that's because he actually works on Daryl Dixon and not on Dead City, though I think he still is involved in a lot of the stuff there with Dead City. I'm not entirely sure why. Or maybe it's more of a scheduling thing. I really don't know. But because it's just Gimple during Dead City, that's really interesting. I feel like maybe that means that Gimple could actually talk about some of the, bigger universe stuff because Gimple is probably going to be the one that is mostly talking about stuff here, just sort of in general. And so, yeah, I'm really interested in a lot of the questions here. And I guess mostly I'm interested in what the answers are going to be because there's a lot of stuff that they can really get into here because I do want more crossovers. I want there to be more excitement. And that's sort of what I'm expecting here from Comic-Con is there needs to be more excitement for The Walking Dead. And I want to see a lot more of that because the last however many months there hasn't been that much excitement. I'm hoping that this year there's going to be more excitement. I'm really, really hoping that we're going to get a lot more excitement for The Walking Dead. I mean, crossovers of any kind, honestly, would be really cool. Like, it's kind of interesting because I saw an interview actually with Lenny James as well. And he's promoting a new movie that he's doing. So yeah, really cool. But it's actually kind of interesting because he talked a lot about like The Walking Dead. And obviously he said that he never really liked, being famous for The Walking Dead, or not really that he didn't like it, but he wasn't doing you know, the role of Morgan Jones to be famous or anything like that. You know, he played Morgan Jones because he liked playing the character. You know, becoming famous for that was just something that sort of happened on its own, but it's not why he did the role. And that was really interesting. And it just really brought up, you know, I guess the idea of like, could we ever see Morgan, you know, come back to The Walking Dead? And again, he did say that he was sort of done with the character, but he also said that, you know, if there was something new, something that he had to do with the character, then obviously he would do that. And I remember around the time of The Ones Who Live, in terms of promotion and all of that, I think that he was saying something about wanting to work with Andrew Lincoln. I know he's talked about that a lot over the last couple of years. I do think that that's probably the only way we're ever going to see Morgan again is if he's actually reunited with Andrew Lincoln, right? Like, we have Morgan and Rick together. I think that's where we'll actually see him, because I think that, I mean, he did a lot with Morgan on Fear the Walking Dead for so many years. I don't know, it just makes sense to me. Like, if they're going to do another story with Rick and Michonne, right? Like a season 2 of The Ones Who Live or whatever it's going to be, it just makes sense that the next story would be, you know, involving Morgan. Because I do think Rick and Daryl reuniting, we're still far away from that. Because my one thing about all of this here is that once they get to that point and Rick and Daryl reunite, and they're actually like everyone together, like an endgame event happens, that's sort of the end of this era of The Walking Dead. And then what's after that? Obviously, they'll probably do a next generation thing. You know, they'll probably do something else with the franchise in general. Maybe there's a reboot of The Walking Dead. You know, they start from season 1 again, or I don't know what they'll do at that point, but that's sort of the end game there. And so I think that they know that in the next couple of years here, there is going to be sort of a build to that end game event, to how they end everything here. Honestly, I give it until 2030. That's sort of my overall prediction. I think if it was in 2035, I mean, that's way too late. Like, the characters are getting a lot older. I think if they waited till 2035, that's way too late, because, you know, the actors are going to be getting a lot older and stuff too. So, like, you do have to sort of take that into consideration, right? 2035 is like 11 years away. And so I just don't think they're going to wait that long to have all the characters reunite. I think that by 2030, that makes a lot of sense, like somewhere by then. And so maybe it happens before that, you know, in 2027 or 28. I mean, Norman Reedus said, you know, he wants to play Daryl Dixon for another like 6 or 7 years. And so that takes you to about 2030. So that's sort of what I'm expecting. Like, they're doing season 3 of Daryl Dixon. That's going to be airing next year in 2025. They're talking about a season 4. That would be 2026. Like, it kind of makes sense to me. Like, they'll probably do a season 5 and 6. So that would be 2027 and 28. Like, again, around that point there, I could see them doing, you know, the end game event or whatever that's going to be around that point, like around 2028, 29, 30, somewhere around there, which seems really far away. But to me, that just makes the most sense, because I think AMC is not going to want to end The Walking Dead that fast, right? And so, yeah, I think in the next couple of years here, that's probably going to be, you know, what happens. I don't see them going any longer than that. So I think that, you know, the job of the next season here, of season 2 of, I guess, The Ones Who Live or whatever they do, maybe that's to sort of build up the endgame event, right? Like, maybe you have something there where the season ends on a cliffhanger, and then that's sort of where season 3 would start, and then you would have all the characters reunite. And so maybe they all reunite on season 3 of The Ones Who Live, or whatever they're going to be calling it, right? Like, I don't know how it's all going to come together, but at some point, Rick and Daryl will reunite, obviously. And yeah, we'll just have to wait and see where this goes. But I feel like this era of The Walking Dead, with all the characters that we know right now, this is all going to end in like the next, like, what, 5 years or something like that. So we'll have to wait and see where all of this goes here. But yeah, I'm really excited for Comic-Con, because again, I do want some more clarity on like what's happening, at least in the next year or so, right? Like, just something else in terms of crossovers with the other characters and all of that. And again, just to create some more excitement overall. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.